Hello, I am Pastor April Hall from Battleground Community United Methodist Church. We want you to know that you are welcome here. I hope that you enjoy this sermon today, and we would love for you to come either in person or online next week to our worship service. It will be on YouTube at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We are going to come from the book of Nehemiah today, chapter 1 and chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the capital, that Hanani, one of my brethren, came with certain men out of Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews that survived, who had escaped exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the survivors there in the province who escaped exile are in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. When I heard these words, I sat down and wept, mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord, God of heaven, and great terrible God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let thy ear be attentive and their eyes open, to hear the prayer of the servant, which now I pray of Israel, the servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against thee. Yea, I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against thee, and we have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the ordinances, which you commanded the servant Moses. Remember the word which thou didst command the servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the people. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, through your dispersed be under the fairest of skies. I will gather them and bring them to the place which I have chosen to make my name dwell here. They are thy servants and thy people, whom you have redeemed by thy great power and thy strong hand. O Lord, let the ear be attentive to your prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of the servant who delight to fear your name. And give success to the servant today, and grant his mercy in the sight of man. Now I was cupbearer to the king. In the month of Nisan, and the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, why is your face sad, seeing that you are not sick? This is nothing else but sadness of the heart. Then I was very much afraid. I had said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad, when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lies waste, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king said to me, for what do you make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. I would like to introduce my friend Catherine today. She came to us a couple weeks ago and told us her story about being a missionary in Turkey, and she is going to share some of her experience there. So Miss Catherine, if you would please come up.
Good morning, church. Today's message will be a little different. It will be combined with my testimony, with stories from the mission field, what God is doing around the world, and I'll show you some pictures. But before I get into all of that, I just want to say how grateful I am to be in a Methodist church. I'm from Fiji. I grew up in a Methodist church in Fiji. And I'm of Indian descent. My ancestors came about 200 years ago to Fiji. So we have a big Methodist congregation because when the British people came, they ruled Fiji, but they brought the gospel too. And that's how Methodists came to be in Fiji, and it's one of the biggest denominations in Fiji. So my church is the Methodist Church of Fiji, the Indian division. So we sing hymns in Hindi, and that's so sweet because it really it blesses my heart. And in Turkey, I lived in Turkey for 7 years, and there's no Methodist church there. So to be able to come to the States, walk into a Methodist church and sing hymns, for me, that is so special. And that really, really blesses my heart. So I just wanted to say thank you for being my battleground Methodist church family while I'm here. It really blesses my heart. Thank you so much, Pastor April and members of the church, for letting me share today. I know I've shared a little bits and pieces of my story here and there, but this way I can share in more detail and share a bit of my testimony. So, I, the book of Nehemiah, the Lord has been using the life of Nehemiah 15 years ago when I started thinking about going into missions. When I was 18 years old, during a youth camp, I recommitted my life to the Lord. And on that particular day, the very first time I heard the Lord speak to me was, "You have a missionary calling over your life." And as an 18-year-old and never heard of a missionary speak in my church or the Great Commission sermons, we didn't really do that in our church. I was like, "Really, God? Are you sure you are calling me, who doesn't know even what missions life is?" But I kept His word in my heart and I didn't share it with anyone. And over the years, as I worked part time for Bible Society in Fiji, and we used to receive magazines from different mission organizations like WEC, like Wycliffe, Youth with a Mission, and I used to read stories about missionaries living in different countries, and I was like, wow. So is this what God is calling me? So that's how that was my exposure to missions. At that time, I was about 20, 21 years old. Then I went on to study in the university. I I was a banker for about 8 years, about 7, 8 years in Fiji, and I had two serious relationships. One relationship didn't work out. In the second relationship, I was engaged, and that didn't work out. And I was like, okay, what is God doing here? Where does He want me to go from here? And in that year, about 2007 and 2008, I was really struggling with my faith. I I wanted to be married, right? Every single woman wants to be married and have family and have kids. And I was in a relationship that there were many red flags in the relationship, but I was ignoring all of that because I just wanted to be married. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad the Lord saved me from that relationship. And in during that time, I was praying and I was thinking, is the Lord really calling me to missions now? And I had many doubts. Then I came across the book of Nehemiah. As you may have heard, that when he heard from his brothers that Jerusalem is lying in ruins, his heart was burdened, right? He fasted, he wept, he fasted, and he prayed. And I feel like when I put myself in that story, the Lord put a great burden in my heart for the lost. And I was struggling with that because I was working in the bank as a foreign exchange dealer. And for my age, I was at a really good position. I was earning good money. At the age of 23, I bought a land and I built a home and I had a car. And I'm not saying all this to glorify myself, but this is not what Indian women do in my culture. Indian women go to school, go to university, get married, and make babies and live like a slave, serving their in laws all their life in the same house in overcrowded homes. So that was the life that my poor mom, imagined for me. Sometimes I joke and say I'm the worst nightmare of an Indian mom because I didn't do any of that. Instead, I left my well paid job and I went into missions to a non salaried organization, Youth with a Mission. My church, the pastor in my church was very mad at me because he didn't want me to leave. He wanted me to become the first Methodist Indian women minister. And I would have loved all of that, but I didn't feel that's what God was calling me to do. And so I was torn between this life of an Indian woman that's expected, you know, my mom was expecting that, my family was expecting that, and then my church was expecting something else. And I was like, I felt pulled from all directions. And the Lord brought Nehemiah into my life. I think I have a biblical crush on Nehemiah. I have studied the life of Nehemiah over and over and over again for many years, from that time when the Lord was pushing me into missions. And like Nehemiah, I felt the burden for the lost. And I had to sacrifice and give up everything that I had worked for. And 15 years on now, I look back at those years, I don't regret any of that. Yes, I lost my income and I lost, a secure job and a monthly salary, and a family kind of turned away from me. My church kind of turned away from me. My we have Hindu relatives and Muslim relatives, and in their minds, they were like, "Are you crazy? No one does that." When you have a good job in a country like Fiji, you want to keep it, you want to grow into it, you want to earn more money, and I left all of that. I went down. I just progress. How do you say it? I took many steps back, and the Lord was saying that you are doing all of this for me, for my glory. So when I was studying the life of Nehemiah during this time in my life, like Nehemiah, I wept, I cried, I prayed, and I fasted. Is this the right choice? Is this the right decision? Is this the time to go into missions? And Nehemiah, we read he was a cupbearer. That is the most trusted position in a palace for anyone who would taste the food and drinks of the king before the king consumes it. And I read an interesting detail few weeks ago that for people like Nehemiah, the cupbearers, to appear sad in front of the king and the queen is something that was not acceptable. He could have lost his life, or he could have lost his position in the palace for doing that. But the Lord prepared him for this moment. He had to feel that burden. He had to cry, and he had to go before the Lord and ask the Lord what to do. And he manned up. He had the courage to go in front of the king and appear sad. Maybe there was a technique he used to appear sad, and the king asked him, "What is wrong with you?" And then he shares with the king, "This is what's happened." And he prayed to the God of heaven. As you read more of chapter 2 and chapter 3, you will see the king gave him favors. He heard his story, and he wrote him letters for safe passage as he went to Jerusalem. So Nehemiah gained great favor in the eyes of the king and the queen. And I feel like that in Nehemiah's life, in that place where I was so burdened, I was so worried that I have to give up all of these good things in my life, and trusting God for that next step and the courage to step out into missions. And the home that I had in Fiji and I still have was on mortgage when I left for missions, which means I was trusting God for that monthly mortgage to come to pay for the house. And twice the bank almost put a lock on my home because the money was not coming in, because the salary wasn't coming in. But the Lord rescued me from some of those, disasters in my life. So I just want to share a little bit more about my life as a missionary. I've been in missions for 15 years, and I have done mission school in New Zealand and in Kona, Hawaii. I did my Bible school there for about a year. And I have also lived in England for 2 years, where I worked with a missions organization. In 2009, during my mission school, so it's a 3 months lecture phase and then 3 months outreach phase. So during the lecture phase, I was praying, what is my calling? What is God calling me to do? And He started showing me Middle East. And He showed me in Middle East, Turkey is where I am calling you to go. And I didn't believe that in the first instance. I thought it's just my emotions, or maybe I heard God wrong. But over the weeks and the months as my outreach went to Turkey, I remember landing in Turkey in June of 2009 at the airport in Istanbul. And I looked around at the local people and I felt I can live here. I love these people. That so the Lord slowly was confirming the calling. He did speak to me about it, but I was in doubt, and He slowly confirmed my calling. So my outreach, we were there for about 2 weeks. Then we moved on to Egypt, then Tunisia, and then to Israel. So after my Bible school, I was preparing to go to Turkey in 2011, but the visas didn't come through. The visas and finances didn't come through, and I found myself in Fiji in missions, but nowhere to go. And of course, there are talkers, right? Oh, you left your job and you left all of this, and now you are here. You have no car, you have no income, and uh, you left all of this for nothing. Maybe you heard God wrong, but I know what God spoke to me. And there was a season when I wasn't sure where I was going, and I even doubted if I heard God right. So while I was in Fiji, I taught. I spoke in many different mission schools. I taught the inductive Bible study method in different YWAM schools in Fiji. So while I was there, I was doing some of that, and then I went to England for 2 years. When I was in England, the electronic visa for Fiji going into Turkey opened up. Before, it wasn't open. Because Fiji, my passport lands me in trouble many places. I cannot get visa for many countries. So for Turkey to open up electronic online visa for Fiji passport was a big deal. It's like, yes, I can go into Turkey now. I can go as a tourist for 3 months, and then from there I can apply for my residence. So from England, I directly went to Turkey, and that was Christmas Eve of 2015. I landed in Antalya, and I applied for my residence while I was there. And I got my residence in 3 days. Many other people who had applied before me in November of 2015, they were still waiting. And after my meeting, my interview on a Wednesday, on a Friday, I got a message on my phone that my card has been posted. And that was unheard. This is God, the God of Nehemiah, providing, like Nehemiah, providing for me too. And people, they are like, who are you? You just came and you have a residence. And we've been waiting for months and we don't have a residence yet. And this is nothing but the work of God, the hand of God upon me and upon the life that He was calling me into. So by then, I was 7 years in missions when I moved to Turkey. And I have been in Turkey, and I'd like to share uh, a bit more about Turkey. If we can have the map of Turkey on board. So this is Turkey. I lived in Antalya, so on the left bottom, you can see Antalya. That's where I lived for 7 years. Turkey is a very important place for Christians. It is where the seven churches of mentioned in Revelations, they're all in Turkey, where Ephesus in red is, Izmir, in that area are all the seven churches. And here on the east side, where you see Syria, just above Syria, that area is where the earthquake happened in February. Many 50,000 plus people died. It's in that location. So you can see from the map on the right side, Turkey borders with Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. And on the other side, Turkey borders with Bulgaria and Greece. So Turkey is sandwiched in between other Middle Eastern countries and Europe. Turkey is a very strategic location. It's home for Apostle Paul. Tarsus is in Turkey. His missionary journeys went through Turkey. There are many ruins. If you go to Ephesus, the ruins of Ephesus is huge. It's magnificent, and you will love it if you ever make it there. While I was in Turkey, I worked with vulnerable women. I worked with Turkish women, Afghan refugees, Iranians, and many whoever the Lord brought in my path, Egyptians and Syrians. In my language school, I met many Iranians and Egyptian women, so I was able to do ministry with them also. The refugee situation in Turkey, I'll just speak a bit more about that. About 5 million refugees live in Turkey, and they flowed in from Syria and Iraq, like you can see from the border. They just walk in, and from Iran too. But Afghanistan is a landlocked country that borders has a big border with Iran and Pakistan. So for Afghans to enter Turkey, they first have to enter into Iran and then into Turkey. So this is a long, long journey for families with kids, with a backpack and child, and that's all they have. And they make these desperate journeys across borders, and they have to pay people smugglers every time they try to cross the border. So this is just to give you some information about Turkey. Turkey is predominantly Islam, population of about 85 million, and only about 0.2% are Christians in Turkey. Turkey has a small Christian population, but it's a very, very significant amount of people at the same time. Recently in Turkey, we have seen that the government has been targeting missionaries, been targeting people who've been living there and trying to get them out of the country. So in January, so we have to renew our residence every 2 years. So mine finished in November. In October, a month before that, I applied for renewal for my visa. So I was waiting and waiting. I didn't hear anything. That in mid-January this year, the government decided to decline my residence permit. And the reason for that was, according to them, the reason was that this category of visa is no longer available, even though you've lived here for 7 years. Unless you own a home, then we can give you a visa. But last week I heard of someone who owns a home and still got the visa rejected. So there is these things that we are working with. The Christians in Turkey are struggling with right now with the residence situation. The government doesn't want us in there. That's it. So they will use any and every reason to try to push Christians missionary out of the country. So in January, when I got the news, I was given 10 days to leave the country. And I was like, I'm not leaving in 10 days. I had two cats and an apartment that I lived in for 7 years. I lived in the same place for 7 years. I can't just abandon everything and leave the country. So I continued to stay into January, February, end of March, I left the country. So because I had an expired visa, I could not travel to the remote locations to visit my Afghan refugee friends, because if the police had caught me on the way, they would have deported me on the spot. So in my city in Antalya, whenever I saw police checking IDs, I would cross the other side of the road only to find them there, and then I'll cross again. I dodged police so many times this year in my life. I've never done that. But that is a life of missionaries in Turkey. My Turkish pastor said that you've probably been under the police radar for a while, and they found your application and like, okay, this is the time to get her, and they did. When you work in a closed Muslim country, you expect to be kicked out one day. If you're able to live for 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's a blessing, a miracle. But you will one day get kicked out because someone is watching you. So my work with the Afghan refugees was right on the top where you can see Samsun. So the Black Sea region is right on the top, and you can see Samsun there. And a little peak on the my left side, your yeah, I guess your left side too, is a place called Sinop. So Sinop and Samsun, these are Black Sea areas where this is a very conservative area. The president of Turkey comes from this area, and you cannot walk around there with shorts and sleeveless shirt. Everyone is going to give you bad looks. So you have to wear, something that covers your shoulder for women, and long pants, because of how conservative these areas are. So I traveled from Antalya, which is right at the bottom, you can see, right to the top, to do ministry in these remote locations. There were some missionaries there, but they also got deported. So there's no one reaching out to believers in this region. There are small Turkish churches, but they don't intentionally work with refugee women. They invite them into their churches, but because most of them don't know how to speak Turkish and they don't understand many things, they eventually fall off the congregation. So in 2020, when the year started, the Lord spoke to me and said, I will send you to the remote place. And I was like, what is the Lord doing? Where will He send me? And that year, through my Turkish church and my Turkish pastor, he gave me some connections of these areas. So when I went there, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know there were Afghan people there. I just went to a Turkish church thinking I'll do ministry with Turkish people, but there were all these Afghan women, and I started building friendship and relationship with them. And the cool thing is that some of them spoke Urdu, which is same as Hindi, and my mother tongue is Hindi. So I was able to do ministry with them in my mother tongue, and they were very grateful for that too, because then they could talk about what's really important to them. Some of them were secret believers in Afghanistan, and when they came to Turkey, they were more open. They could go to church and not wear the covering and things like that. And many Afghans, they came to Turkey, then they found the Lord. So there were so many good things happening in their lives at the same time, because they found their faith and they could freely go to a church. Turkey is not necessarily, very open to the gospel. It's not necessarily a very safe place, but it's better than Afghanistan, is what I can say. And so I traveled to these remote places, and in Ankara, the capital of Turkey, kind of in the middle there are a few Afghan women I did ministry with also, and they were very open to the gospel. We saw baptisms taking place. We saw healing taking place. One woman was told by a doctor she'll need a surgery for some kind of infection. We prayed for her, we prayed for healing. 2 days later, she went to another doctor and he couldn't find anything. That's just a miracle. And these people, they don't have money for surgery. They don't, doctors, nurses, dentists don't want to see them. They are considered the lowest class of people in Turkey. Many Turkish people, they are very racist towards Afghans, towards refugees in general, towards Arabs. And it really breaks my heart to see that happening in Turkey. So they live day to day, whatever they can find, whatever work they can find, and they are exploited by local Turkish employers too. They are not paid the right rate they should be. So some of these people, they struggle a lot financially. They live in very poor conditions. Pregnant women, they go to the hospital. They are not given the right care, or they are not. They're just not given the attention that they need, because they are refugees and they cannot afford to pay for medical services. The government gives a very little allowance. I think like $20 a week, which is nothing, because You cannot even buy groceries for that much for a whole family of five. So this is a life of some of the many refugees, not some, many refugees living in Turkey. I'll show a few more pictures of Turkey, and then I'll share a bit more about missions. So we can go on to the next. This is in Mardin, which is biblical time Mesopotamia. It's on the far east, and this is one of, I think it was a museum that has some Christian artifacts in there too. Next picture, please. So this is a place called Nusaybin. It's on the east side, and I went to this particular location. I am there was a fence, a border from Turkey to Syria, and I was at the bottom of that. I was right there, and I wanted to take a picture of Syria, but there was heavy security, military and army tanks around me, and you're not allowed to take pictures. So I found a cafe on the fifth floor. I went into the cafe and I secretly took a picture. So on the far horizon, where you see the blue line, from there is the Syrian border. So there's the first border where I am, and then there's no man's land in the middle, and then there's another border from there. Just so you can see how dry and deserted these places are. Next one. This is Cappadocia. I always say Cappadocia because that's the Turkish word. I'm trying to switch the terms in my head, and I think I'm getting better at it. These are cave churches where Christians lived many, many years ago. And my friend Susie, uh, I just met her. She's lived in this area, and she knows a lot about these places too. Some of these places you can still go and see what they look like. Many are just a hole in the cave, there's nothing there. But there are some places where you can see how Christians lived underground. Yer altar, they call it in Turkey. And this is really amazing. You see how our fathers of faith lived in those days, and how when persecution came, they hid underground, and there's massive, massive spaces underground. They even had animals, livestock underground. That's how clever and smart they were. And this place is famous for wine. So when Christians lived there, they made wine, and they sold it for, they traded that for their income. But when persecution came, the Muslims took over, and they took over the whole winery business too. So in Turkey, if you ever find Cappadocia or Cappadocia wine, that's where it comes from. Next picture. This is one of the churches mentioned in the book of Revelation. I think this is Sardis. I could be wrong, but it's one of the ruins in Turkey. Next one. This is a Catholic church on the east of Turkey in Antakya, biblical name Antioch. This church was slightly damaged during the earthquake in February. There are some cracks on the wall. I'm not sure if they're worshiping there right now, but this is one of the Catholic churches that has found great favor so far with the Turkish government, and they are able to continue to meet and have their building still. The church, the priests, they also have to keep renewing their residence. So that is something some of them struggle with because they are not always able to renew it. Next picture. This is one of the Antioch churches. If this is the church where believers were first called Christians or not, it's not 100% sure. But during the earthquake, unfortunately, this cave church got damaged. I'm not sure if it's open to public now or not. I doubt that it is. But when I was there, that's what it looked like. And it's very small. You just walk in. It was bigger before, but because it's into the cave and it's there, rocks and stuff falling, they closed a whole part of it off to the public, and there's just a small church in there. Is that the last one, I think? This is one of the old churches also. It's more like a tourist attraction, unfortunately, one of the ruins. This is Mesopotamia, Mardin. This is how they lived with layers and layers of homes there. So it's also from one of the top places you can see Syrian border from there too. And this is in Diyarbakir, also in the East Mesopotamia area. In this place, they still have monks who receive training. It's one of the few places in Turkey where there are still. It's like a training center where there are monks still coming here for training. We didn't see them because they were closed off. There was some, you can only enter the tourist areas, but above where they live and have their classes and all that, those places were closed off to public. This is one of the churches in Nusaybin. There's a guy here named Daniel. He kind of looks after this place. This was closed because of COVID, but I just walked in and he was there and he let me in. And he let some other people in, but officially it was closed. So I spoke to him. He said, we are allowed to have services in this building, but we don't have people. We don't have a priest who would come and live in this remote, far east by the Syrian border and conduct services. But my prayer is that these old ruined churches will one day, will one day we will worship God in these places. But unfortunately, because of lack of resources and personnel, they are not able to hold services in here. And it probably needs a lot of renovation work too, and they don't have the money for that. And the government will not give money to renovate a Christian sanctuary. I think that's the last picture. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a little bit of Turkey for you, and some pictures of Turkey. When I work with women, they struggle to share what's going on in their lives, and some of them, they have never been given a chance to openly talk about what's happened in their past, abuses and things like that. So my heart has been to work with women, help them verbalize their issues and problems. And I've gotten women, they have, some of them were married when they were 17 years old. After their first menstruation, that's the sign they are to be married off. So they have a lot of kids and no parental training, and they've lived in really bad marriage situations and lived with abuses all their life. And my heart breaks for women like that. And so I have been actively trying to go into these areas, go into their homes, and have tea with them, and pray with them, and share with them, and tell their story to the whole world, because people don't know that these are the struggles that they are going through. So I use prayer counseling, inner healing, and life coaching tools to reach out to these women. And as I've been walking alongside them and mentoring them and discipling them, I realized they have more issues that I cannot help them with, like mental health issues, trauma, depression, sexual abuse issues. And in the last 2 years, every time I'm with women like that face to face, I walk away feeling so mad and frustrated because I don't have the resources to help them. And there are not many people in those areas or who have the right training and qualification to work with women who have mental health issues. So I started feeling in my heart that I need to get more training, and I need to, do a counseling training so I can help them better. In this country, and in many Western countries, you have services available. You can call a support line or talk to someone. But these women in these countries, in Turkey, there is nothing like that. So for them to open up is a big, big step they are taking, and that takes time and effort. But I don't want to lead them on a path where I don't know how to deal with some of these things. So I felt like I needed some training. And last year, the Lord, during my sabbatical time, I took 3 months sabbatical last year. The Lord started putting on my heart about taking a counseling training. So in my head, I started thinking and praying, and I found a college. I asked them a few questions. I was still inquiring when in January my visa news came. So at that point, it became very clear I need to pursue further education. So I will be studying counseling, Christian counseling in New Zealand next year in February. So because I've been deported, I can't enter Turkey right now. But maybe in October I can go on a tourist visa. But right now I have been trying to recover from the transition. I had to give up so many things and so many losses at so many levels, and at the same time trying to prepare for the next step. So this is my story, and this is where I'm at now. And sometimes I don't know what the next steps will be. Like in July, I didn't know I'll be here. So I live month by month before I go back to Fiji. I'm just trying to rest and recover. And Fiji is not a place where I find a lot of encouragement and support, because everyone is telling me how bad a daughter I am because I'm not looking after my mom, and that I'm a prodigal church member who left the church, and things like that. So I've been here, and every opportunity I get to share, I can go on talking. So I'm looking at the time, and I should stop talking. But this is who I am and what I'm doing, and I just wanna ask you to pray for missionaries around the world. Some of them live in very isolated conditions. They don't have any other support or team members or Christians, and but they are working with the local people right there into their lives and entering their villages and schools and working in hospitals. Pray for missionaries. Pray. The harvest is plentiful, right? The Bible says, but the workers are few. So we need to pray people into the most remote, most difficult, most dark places, and and pray the Lord will bring a light into their lives. And as I prepare and get ready for my next step, I'm praying that the Lord will touch hearts to give financially towards my mission work. We don't have a salary; we live on donations and charity, and I need monthly living expenses, and also I need school fees for my school, about 15,000 US dollars. Until I pay that, the school won't release a visa letter, and I cannot apply for student visa. So one thing connects with another and another. So I'm just in this place where I'm trying to, raise money so I can go back to the mission field, and I'd love to go to Afghanistan at some point. So pray for me. I will leave. I have a prayer card and a prayer letter that I just give away to people as I meet them, so they can remember me, put it on your fridge. And there's a couple of copies on the table up there, so please grab a copy, pray for me, pray that the Lord will bless the mission field and bless me and the people I work with. So I apologize, I went overboard a little bit. Thank you.